Men and female cricketers, well played indeed. Now, there's just under 6 months till Japan are set to host the Olympic Games, games which are postponed to the year 2021, having been moved from last year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the International Olympic Committee and the Tokyo 2020 Organising Committee are adamant that the Games will kick off as scheduled on the 23rd of July. Recent opinion polls show that the majority of people in Japan, about 80% of those surveyed, do not want Tokyo Olympics to be held this summer. I had a chat to sports journalist at the Japan Times, Dan Orlowitz, on what the mood is in Japan ahead of the global showpiece. And with that, I bid you good night.
The mood is non-existent, really. There isn't much hype building up to the Olympics. It's not at all like it was a year ago when there was concern over the coronavirus, but there was also still that anticipation, the countdown, 6 months to go. We were getting ready for the torch relay. Things looked like they were on track. It's been a very busy week for those of us who are in the industry. The Times report that suggested that the Japanese government has made the decision to cancel the games came out, and because of that, the IOC, local organizers, NOCs had to issue their denials. And so there is that moment of limbo right now where, as far as we know, the games are going to go ahead, but the idea has always been that the games are going to go ahead until they don't, just like last year.
You know that Asia, in particular China, the numbers, that's what they are, actually. They say they've got the better of it. They know how to stop the spread of it. Japan is currently going through what is being reported as a third wave of COVID-19. Then the reality strikes. Which country, if the IOC and the local NOC in Japan saying the games are going ahead, which country do we expect to send their athletes over? One. Two, are Japan going to allow, for example, let's say South African athletes, where there's a new variant of COVID-19 strain that has been picked up, the same as they have done in the UK, the same as they've done in Brazil? Will that country expect to let our athletes in, or those athletes, if the Olympics are a go?
I would expect that a condition of the Olympics taking place would be that Japan would allow all participating countries to send their athletes. Right now, the country is in a limited state of emergency, covering about a quarter of our 47 prefectures, and that includes Tokyo and the surrounding area. We aren't allowing business travel right now. In fact, the borders are essentially closed unless you're a Japanese citizen or you have a working permit if you have residency. So for us to get to the point where we can open up the borders, allow athletes to come to the games, and even allow fans, officials, media to come and cover the games, it does seem like we're a little far away from that. Because Japan hasn't even started rolling out the vaccine. We're expecting to start vaccinating frontline workers in late February, the elderly, people with pre-existing conditions in March and April, and then the public from May. So the question is going to be, is that enough time to get everyone vaccinated in time for the games? And what sort of countermeasures will the local organizers be able to put in place to assure the safety of the athletes? So that there's a very difficult calculus going on right now.
How concerned are we at ground level, at ground zero, if I can call it that, in Japan with regards to that? I mean, you just said Japan has not rolled out a vaccine yet. The people, the athletes, because at the end of the day, this is about them, isn't it? They would like to have an Olympics in their country. There's no greater feeling, I think it would be, as an athlete or anyone in sports, to host an event as big as the Olympic Games.
I think that we're in a tough position because in Japan, the number of cases has been relatively low compared to Great Britain, the United States, in South America, for example. We hit 5,000 total deaths over the weekend, and that Of course, every life lost to this is a tragedy, but that is a very low number compared to a lot of other countries. That said, I think that right now the prevailing public sentiment is of concern. Recent public opinion surveys have shown that roughly 80% of the Japanese public do not want these games to go on as scheduled. And that group of 80% is split roughly evenly between canceling them altogether or postponing them a second time. So the national sentiment is that only about 25% of the public think that the games should go on in July.
Economically, already we saw how Greece was in a slumber when they hosted 2004, because you got to recoup the money somehow. I'm sure the Japanese government is worried as well.
Absolutely. Japan has spent roughly, I believe, 16 billion US dollars on this bid and on getting ready for the games. And that covers a lot of things. That's promotion, that's marketing, that's infrastructure, that's building new venues, that's renovating existing sites such as the Budokan, various arenas, building hotels. I mean, all of this happened in anticipation of these games. This has been a 10-year project, more or less, stretching all the way back to Japan's bid for the 2016 Olympics, which was eventually won by Rio. And the 2019 World Cup, or Rugby World Cup, which, of course, congratulations, a year and a half later, that was the dress rehearsal for the Olympics. And I covered that. It was an amazing tournament to cover, and to have tens of thousands of foreign sports fans come in from around the world and explore Japan and experience Japan. That was an incredible experience, and the Olympics were supposed to be that magnified with not just the 18 or so countries participating in the Rugby World Cup, but athletes and fans and officials from 200 countries coming in and experiencing Japan. So this was supposed to be, the big soft power play of the century. And instead, what could happen is that if, for example, they decide to hold the games behind closed doors, the IOC will get all of its broadcasting fees, because, of course, the games will still go on and the broadcasters will still get their content. But Japan won't get any of the money that it was expected to receive from ticketing, merchandise, the hotels. All of that inbound tourism goes away. So for them to not hold the games as originally conceived would be a huge economic blow for a country that is already struggling economically to deal with COVID and with everything else.
Here is Japan with the low numbers of COVID-19 infections and deaths, as you have right now. South Africa, on average, we send about 350 to 400 athletes, including team members, to an Olympic Games, having covered 5 Olympic Games myself. Brazil sends quite a big number as well, in particular the football teams. The United States normally sends about the second highest number of Olympiads, following the host country of any Olympic Games. Push come to shove. Let's say Japan says, look, we're going to host these Olympic Games. But here you are, we're having countries like the UK, like the USA, like South Africa and Brazil with these variant, COVID-19 infections. Should we or could we see an Olympic Games where they say, look, we're not taking an athlete from this country or that country or that country, because then this puts a whole tailspin to what the IOC themselves will have to do, because the Olympics are expected to be all-inclusive of everyone.
I don't think that you can have an Olympic Games without athletes from the US, from the UK, from South Africa, from Brazil. I think that that's an incredibly slippery slope. Obviously, in the past, countries have abstained from participating in the Olympics for political boycotts. That sort of situation does happen, but this is something entirely different. I feel as though the narrative that the IOC and that organizers have been pushing is for these games to be a triumph of humanity, showing that we can band together and defeat the virus. How much you agree or disagree with that is sort of up to the individual. But it doesn't make sense for them to have pushed that narrative for the last year and then say, well, in the end, we're not going to let U.S. athletes in. Obviously, that would cause a lot of headaches for the IOC. It would be a loss of face for Japan, and that's not an avenue that I would expect them to take. I think that if they're in a position where they have to prohibit, where they have to ban a large number of countries from participating, I think that's at the point where you start to evaluate another postponement or cancellation.
As far as COVID-19 is concerned, with regards to Japan, where you are stationed, how is it in your region? I mean, we always speak about, we look at the United States, we look at Europe most of the time. How is that region? How is that part of the world? How have they gone around getting along, so to speak, with the pandemic at hand in general now, outside of sports?
Well, I think it very much depends on the country. Obviously, China had sort of the most severe cluster of infections early on, and they've dealt with it pretty strongly. South Korea had a number of very dangerous, very fatal clusters early on, and they really tackled it aggressively with lots of just strict lockdowns and very strict quarantine requirements. If you look at people on Twitter who are coming to South Korea or they're coming to Taiwan, and they document all of the steps that they take to enter the country and are spending hours at the airport waiting for tests to come in. Japan has been less stringent. They have mandated quarantines on entry, but it's not really enforced. The problem that Japan has faced is that the government doesn't actually have the authority to lock down. What they do have the authority to do is ask very strongly, basically, pretty please do this. But in a very authoritative tone. And for the most part, the public has gone along with it. You still go out and there are restaurants that are violating the curfew, which is, I believe, 8 o'clock for restaurants and for bars. Sporting events have had a number of restrictions since they resumed last June, and they've been following that, and the fans have been good about following those. But overall, sometimes it is, you go out and it's hard to tell that there's a big pandemic going on, but we're managing. In general, most of the Japanese population is good about mask wearing. Social distancing is a bit difficult in Tokyo, given the size of the population, and we're dealing, we're managing. It's fair to say that in some ways we've been luckier than we've been smarter about dealing with the pandemic. But so far we have managed as a country, and hopefully once the vaccines roll out, things will start to get better. Dan, we could converse about Olympics and sports all day. I know I still need to pick your brain about baseball, and I see you got that South African scarf on your top right shoulder. Keep it there, man. I do. I thought you would appreciate this. This is from that from that final.
Oh, of course we appreciate it. What is the score?
Of course. I don't even remember. When I was there, pitch side taking photos. That was a blur, but no, it was.
South Africa won.
Of course, and you know what? That was my first time covering anything rugby related. It was such an incredible 6 weeks. The South African fans were amazing. I miss it. I miss covering sports like that so much, and hopefully we can get back to that soon. In
fact, whilst we're heavy on the topic of rugby in Japan, a lot of South Africans, most of them are currently plying their trade down there. How has been the pickup since the World Cup hosted by Japan?
Well, that's the thing. This was because it was such a successful tournament. We were expecting to have a lot of momentum going into the sport, and they were coming up with plans for a new league. It was supposed to be a professional league launching this year, but then the 2020 top league season was called off midway through once the coronavirus really started to spread. The new season was supposed to start a couple weekends ago, postponed because of the current state of emergency. So they've canceled the first couple rounds, and that's supposed to start later in February. And we're supposed to get the new league, which is going to be this amateur professional mix. It's a bit odd, but that's going to start at the beginning of 2022. So rugby has been a victim of the pandemic here because we were supposed to get so much momentum from the World Cup and it just evaporated once the virus hit.
Dan Orlowitz, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Much appreciated. Hopefully, as we said, we're crossing thumbs for Tokyo 2020/2021. This would have been my 6th Olympic Games. I think most importantly, this would have been a couple of athletes' last or final Olympics. And for some athletes, this would have been their first Olympic Games experience. So whether it does go on or does not go on, I think we wish Japan the best of luck. And thank you very much indeed for joining us right here on SABC News Channel.